Our first speakers are Dr. Matt Spangler and Bob Weber. And these gentlemen are well known in the area of beef cattle genetics. And Dr. Spangler is an extension specialist at the University of Nebraska, and Dr. Bob Weber is the cow-calf extension specialist at Kansas State University. These gentlemen will discuss crossbreeding in 2014 and why these talks are still needed.
Replacement. Now, I'm not trying to take anything out of you guys' wholesale catalog, because I'm sure some of you put that in there, right? This bull is going to do it all. But it would be much easier to say, I just expect them to focus on this narrow thing and be the best. There's huge efficiencies to be gained there. So Bob, how do I decide which crossbreeding system to use?
Well, it's a great question, Matt. Sort of by design, you can't read this in the back, okay? And the idea here is that there's lots of different systems, okay? Lots of differing levels of complexity, and the complexity doesn't necessarily scale by size, okay? In some regards, the bigger you are, the easier it is to manage the complexity, okay? So we'll use a 3-breed rotational system, okay? If you're a medium-sized guy and you've got 250 head of cows, 3-breed rotation means that you've got roughly about 80 cows in each mating group that you've got to breed to a specific group of bulls, okay? Is that painful? Especially if you want to try and run them as 250 head of cows through the winter, you're going to sort them back out at breeding season. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? Okay? What if you're a 3,000 head guy? Okay, so you got 1,000 head of cows in each of those breed units. Is a 3-breed rotational system pretty easy? Yeah. Okay. I wean heifer calves at one place. I put them on a pot load the same day I'm sending steers away, and call heifers. Send one pot load to the next unit over. Okay. Drop those heifers off to that guy because that's the breeding group they're going into. I've got to source one set of bulls by each breed for each of those locations. They're already separate units, right? Breeding pasture, all that stuff. I don't have to identify cows. I'm going to squat. Okay? It's a lot easier because you're big. Okay? So there's an argument that gets bantered about well, crossbreeding is too complicated. Well, it is if you're not smart about how you go about it. Okay? And you guys need to understand as basically advisors to your commercial customers what are appropriate and useful systems given your customer circumstance, okay? There's not a one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to selecting breeding system for your commercial customers. Okay, there's some ones that generally work good across lots of places. Composite bulls or hybrid bulls or F1 bulls, whatever you want to call them, Sim-Angus bulls, work pretty good in lots of places, but they're, in some cases, not maybe the best solution. Okay, we might be more efficient, gain more ground by using purebred bulls in some groups, maybe in one of these rotational systems, or an F1 terminal sire system, okay? So in one of the references we're going to give you in a minute, there's this table and a discussion about it in the NBC EC Beef Sire Selection Manual. And the thing that it does is it breaks out, I think in a very practical way, basically what percentage of the cow herd gets used in the system for the production and marketing of calves. So if you've got a system where you've got to build your replacement heifers, so this is a 2-breed rotation terminal sire system, what percentage of the cows go into each of those breeding groups, and focus then on, like this system, you keep replacement heifers out of this AB rotation, all of the terminal sire. So it gives you a percentage of calves to expect out of each of those mating systems. Breeding pasture constraints, percent retained heterosis, that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, if you're serious about crossbreeding, retention of maternal heterosis is mission number 1. Okay? And that's the thing that for most people becomes the challenge, is figuring out how to build replacement heifers that meet your breed specifications from both a complementarity standpoint to make those environmentally adapted cows, and also at least optimize retained heterosis. Okay? The choosing of the breed stuff, I think, also comes from as Matt's pointed out, a complementarity perspective. So figuring out your production environment, feed availability, and this is a Jim Gosey slide from a number of years ago, and one that I think is very good because it helps point us towards what kind of biological type animal fits in certain production constraints. Okay, so if you're from Beulah, Colorado, where I grew up, feed availability, it's short grass prairie dry country. Feed availability is low. Stress is probably high because of fluctuation in drought condition. Our tolerance then for high milk production is pretty low, so we need low to moderate milk, low to moderate mature size for cows, high ability for cows to store body condition or energy. So you can see how this works. Resistance to stress, I mean high, calving needs high, lean yield, low to medium. Okay, so it helps point you to kind of what biological types make sense. And as Matt pointed out, when we think about bringing a breed into a crossbreeding system to leverage the complementarity bit, we need to focus on what are the core traits or performance of those breeds. Okay? As many of you know, I used to work at the Gelbvieh Association, and through a period of time where there was a lot of emphasis on improving carcass merit, okay? Particularly marbling score. And we had lots of discussions about building genetic improvement programs to dramatically increase intermuscular fat in Gelbvieh cattle. Okay? You can sit down and figure out the response to selection equation, and if we need to improve a full marbling score in terms of genetic merit, how long do you think it was going to take to move the whole breed that far? A while, like all of my career. Okay? I wasn't really excited about that. Okay? There's a 40-year time horizon. Okay? How can I fix that in one swoop? In 1 year, in one breeding decision? Put Angus or Red Angus in there. Integress the genetics, right? Was that popular? No. Was it effective? Yes. Okay. The point is that we can make improvement within breed for additive traits. Okay. We can make Simmental marble like Angus. We can make Gelbvieh marble like Angus if we got enough time. Okay. For our customers, though, the solution is often the complementarity solution. Okay. Go out, pick the genetics you need. You've got a whole suite of traits that you excel at. Figure out how to put those together complementary way. Okay. One of the pervasive myths is the idea that heterosis is a one-off sort of expedition. Okay. That first time we cross, we get a whole bunch of heterosis, and then after that, zero. Okay, is that true, false? Very false, right? We can lose heterosis if we make decisions that increase a particular breed fraction over time in the population. So accumulate genes from a particular breed. So we lose the interaction between loci. But managed correctly, heterosis is retained in perpetuity for future generations, so long as you avoid increasing breeds and avoid inbreeding. And it's related then to the probability of alleles from different breeds pairing together. Okay, so the idea, if you change the frequency of, say, Angus genes in a population, and you increase that over time, you proportionally decrease heterozygosity, or pairings of, say, Angus and Simmental genes together. And so you lose heterosis. That's the mechanism by which we lose heterosis. Okay, retained heterosis is pretty easy to calculate. It's the sum of the squared breed fractions across those breeds. It's maybe more detailed than you need, but if you sit down and play with the math a little bit, you quickly figure out that if you start changing things much from half, you lose heterosis, and that's the idea of this increasing breed fraction. Matt, I remember you made this slide. I'm trying to remember the point we discussed to go with it. We had half Simmental, half Angus bull mated to Sim Angus cows. Okay, we calculate the expected retained heterosis out of that system. It's the typical F1 mating heterosis, and that's 50% of the F1. okay, over time. If we made half Limousine, half Angus bull, made it to Angus cows, we also get 50%. Okay.
But the point here is there's different ways to get to the same level of retained heterosis. But the decision, again, is conditional on clientele's needs. Where are they located? What are their marketing objectives? And that helps us determine what breeds need to be utilized to best fit them. Again, maximizing heterosis isn't the goal, okay? It's a piece of the puzzle, but we need to be cognizant of what breeds fit into that to best meet their needs.
Yep. The other bit, too, that's important to recognize here is if you think about this example from a systems perspective and benefit of particularly maternal heterosis, which one of these is better? I both end up with calves that are 50% retained heterosis. Is that true about the cows in those systems? No, right? This Limousine Angus bull is made to Angus cows. That's the one where we only get the direct or individual heterosis, right? So if you had a choice, if you're giving advice to your commercial customer, you know that he needs calves that are 3/4 Angus to meet some product specification due to his retained ownership program, you're better off advising him to make this cross for the cows and terminally sire mate to the Angus bull to produce the 3/4 Angus calves. Does that make sense to everybody? Now the challenge becomes, well, how do I build replacement heifers? If you're really a serious terminal guy, as Matt suggests, you go buy those, okay? And you put Simmental and Angus in here and make them 3/4 Sim Angus, whatever you want to do. How do I choose a breeding program? One of the questions I get a lot as I interact with commercial producers is, well, what system should I use? And I mean, it's sort of the same one with what bull should I use to breed my cows? How the hell do I know, right? They have all kinds of training, but I don't know anything yet about your operation. So as you start having dialogues with your commercial customers, there's really 4 or 5 things that you need to explore before you can give good advice, okay? Those things are outlined here. 1, are you profit or premium focused? There's the coffee shop discussion about I sold calves for $3 because they were straight whatever, da 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 da. So let's interject profit into the discussion. We can have both pieces. The other part is, so this is understanding your customer's mindset. The other piece, obviously, that's important, we talked a lot about differences in herd size and the impact that has on appropriateness of system that you apply. The other components of that include how do I generate replacement heifers? And I think replacement heifer decision has a huge impact, right? We want to retain maternal heterosis, and if we can't effectively manage a breeding system to capture maternal heterosis, we need to really think about the structure of which we retain or capture replacement females, i.e. maybe we should just go buy them. Maybe we should contract with somebody to build F1 heifers for our system, terminally sire mated. It's a really easy breeding program to manage, and I've taken out the complexity of building and maintaining maternal heterosis in the system, okay? So answering this question is really important. How do I market calves? Has some consequence, particularly from the breed complementarity standpoint. Understanding what the expectations are of calf performance and calf trait attributes as they enter the marketing channel will play some role, both in traits. So are we more focused on a weaning endpoint where, calf survival, calf weaning weight, number of calves we get to the marketplace drive the bus? Maybe some coat color considerations, or do we retain ownership clear to the rail? So, they're all red and white on the inside, so coat color doesn't matter. We can do some things differently in the system, independent of that. Other constraints, obviously environment and management. I like Matt's take on complementarity as we think about really driving our selection decisions to focus on sires for replacement heifers and sires for terminal calves, and really driving those two apart so we build cows that are more environmentally adapted to our production system, and likely for many of us means minimizing supplemental feedstuffs over time, and then other management constraints. So, you know, if you're a 250 head guy and you have management and expertise, you could manage a 2 or 3 breed rotation. It might not be fun, but you could do it. There's some guys who are going to say, there's no way I can do that. So that takes off a whole set of systems that may not make sense to them off the table. Okay? So you need to ask those questions. Those are the ones I always ask at the beginning. They're the ones Matt asks at the beginning before you give any advice on what system makes sense. You got to work through all that stuff to understand the scenario. I like to think of you guys as consultants. Okay, you're consultants for your commercial customers. They look to you for advice. They look to you for information. To make that relationship work well, you have to be able to give that good advice, right? So that means getting trained up and knowledgeable on these things and others. And so there's some good resources, the sire selection manual. If you want more information on and a review on more heterosis stuff, Matt and I did a e-extension webinar a couple of years ago that's fairly popular on the web, and you can find it. And, we can share these links with you and get you to the right spot. Put your customer first, right? There's a lot of, one of the things I love about this group is that you are customer focused, right? Matt and I work both with lots of other breed groups, and there's lots more internal discussion than there is external discussion. And I love you guys' external focus on your customer. And that's paramount in making these crossbreeding decisions work for your customer and for you in the long run. I mentioned this before in terms of product offering. If you're going to go out and sell crossbreeding, be sure, well, it's in your interest, let's say, to have a product offering that matches that, right? I mean, if I'm going to go out and advise to use Sim Angus bulls, wouldn't it be really nice if I had a set of Sim Angus bulls to sell? Yeah. Or if I'm going to go and say, okay, you've got a set of straight Angus cows, we want to move to an F1 system. In the first few breeding seasons, to build F1 cows in your program, I need what kind of bulls? I need high percentage Simmental bulls, probably. And then over time, as I keep replacement efforts, I need to transition then to Sim Angus bulls. Have both in the product offering, okay? Just simple things that make sense. The other piece is, particularly if you're going to focus on one breed and count on a partner to source bulls of another breed, understand how to use the crossbreed EPD adjustments. Okay? Your customers are going to be making decisions to leverage the additive and non-additive components of the genetic stuff. And so understanding, as I go out and certainly Wade, the common base system that you've got now is a huge leap forward for producers that use breeds that participate in your genetic evaluation system, because they can make transparent decisions across breed source without having to jump through a bunch of hoops for a crossbreed EPD adjustments. That simplifies things dramatically. But not all of the breeds that we may think about using in a system participate in that. So we still need to understand how to use these. And we have a good calculator at K-State. It's an Excel-based tool where you can put in basically EPDs of any breed base and convert them to any other breed base. Okay, so it helps makes that adjustment. You know, for guys that are familiar with Angus EPDs, put the Simmental based EPDs on the Angus base and talk to your customers. Okay, get that obstacle out of the way. Other points to ponder, Matt. And I know, given the environments that you guys work in, mature weight becomes a concern.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that as we increase one thing, we're going to change something else. And so in the quest to increase weaning and yearling weight, they are at least moderately correlated with mature weight. So increasing yield can come at the detriment of the cow herd if we're retaining replacement heifers. And that's part of the argument I make for commercial people clearly delineating being terminal only, because it does help alleviate that problem. And because of that, if I have to choose whether I want big bulls or big cows, I'm going to choose big bulls and smaller cows. That just tends to make sense to me. And what's the threshold there on the differences in size? It's pushing it to the point right before you have dystocia problems, right? That's the concern. But it makes much more sense to moderate the cow herd and have larger bulls. I showed much earlier on that common breeds have increased in terms of mature weight. But we do have the ability to use selection tools to moderate maternal lines. First, we have to develop maternal lines, perhaps, but we certainly do have the tools to moderate those. We showed earlier that heterosis in crossbred cows increases their pulling age, which would reduce replacement costs and increase the chance, at least, for a profitable cow. Here's a bug for me. The notion that beef breeds should be all-purpose, that's common, right? It's pervasive, but it's counterproductive. And Wade, as I look at a multi-breed database, I look at the potential for commercial cattlemen to come to a entity to fulfill whatever their needs may be. And I see absolutely no harm in a breed saying, here's what we're going to be good at, recognizing another breed may be good at other things. There is no harm in that at all. In fact, I see large advantages to that. Heterosis is important and underutilized. It's been called a free lunch. It's not free, okay? We don't get improvements in performance with zero cost. The point is, though, the improvement we get drastically outweighs the marginal increase in cost. So the profitability is increased. I also wanted to quickly mention another benefit of crossbreeding programs, and that's the mitigation of risk relative to genetic defects. Some people get hard on seed stock breeders who have experienced genetic defects in their herd. I don't think that's their fault, right? They were trying to increase additive genetic merit. They did some inbreeding or line breeding, I suppose, is the kind way of putting that.
It's inbreeding when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's line breeding when it does. It's a hard difference.
And they ran into problems, okay? They were doing their job. A commercial man, however, who has a large problem with genetic defects, made a lot of mistakes. And one was not implementing a crossbreeding system. Okay, so crossbreeding can help mitigate the risk of genetic defects, and we think of a handful now. There's hundreds we just haven't identified. And I would argue that for a commercial cattleman, crossbreeding helps mitigate that risk. The other thing I'd say with respect to heterosis, where we need to head to, so in the genomics piece, right, we like to be able to predict the genetic merit of crossbred animals, but also I would argue that someday, and I'm sorry, Wade, these probably aren't the right breeds to have put up here, but I put them because I wanted to make a point. It's not just crossing this breed with this breed, but which line of animals within this breed with what line of animals in that breed to maximize heterosis. Furthermore, we always say that heterosis is directly related to breed heterozygosity. That's a falsehood, right? So could we actually, through the use of genomic tools, say, yeah, maybe that crossbred's only a quarter blood, but they're heterozygous, heterozygotic. Just an hour and a half of crossbreed. But they're different at the important loci, all right? Not all the way across the genome, but at critical loci, such that they can actually come close to 100% heterosis. So I think that's where we need to get to. The point I showed out here, and I'm going to quiz Bob now. Bob, do you know who this is? Okay, good. Calvin Drake's in the audience. Calvin, Bob's now officially a faculty member of Kansas State, right? So I put this in here, Calvin. Of course,
that's all I needed to know for 10 years.
If you go to K-State, you've heard about Conoco, right? Because that's Dr. Don Good back there. First continental crossbred steer to ever win the international. I think Don used to have him a picture of him in his wallet next to grandkids because that was a famous animal at K-State. The other thing I wanted to point out quickly is, as we think about merchandising bulls to commercial producers that implement crossbreeding, here's an important thing to take into account. The lion's share of beef cattle producers are smaller. Okay? So these complex systems that we talk about sometimes, it confuses them and they can't implement. So the composite bulls that a lot of you merchandise fit them to a T, right? It makes crossbreeding simple.
So in this slide, the light blue is farm count or number of farms, and that's this axis. The dark color is a percentage of inventory that they control. Okay, so we'll branches that a little bit.
That's counts. Yep, that's counting. And I actually put this slide in before Steve Verdakovich spoke on the panel last night, and so I challenge you guys to also think about, could you actually stamp a product much akin to what the agronomy sector does? Could you develop a composite and say, this is a composite for this area of the country for producers that market calves in this fashion, and boom, make it that simple. And take a lot of the complexity and cumbersome nature of bull selection out of the picture. Because I come from both the farming and ranching background, and I never recall, Bob, in the spring when we hooked up the planter, first going out to test plots and looking at ears of corn. I don't recall having done that.
I called the Pioneer guy and said, hey, what do we need?
Say, we're in zone this, send us corn.
Yep, and they sent you.
Yep. So can we begin to move in that direction relative to supplying seed stuff? The other point I wanted to make quickly is we hit on Angus a bunch, and we did in this audience probably, and you guys probably do too. And Hereford breeders knock on Angus. Right? Everybody knocks on Angus. Why? Because they have large market share. So what I would challenge you with is if 10 or 20 years down the road, the roles are reversed. Okay? And you guys all of a sudden have the largest market share. Are you still science driven? Right now, the science we just talked about very much fits your plight. But if roles are reversed, how would things be then? It's easy for us to side with you now. But Wade knows me well enough. I have no problem at all in telling him I vehemently disagree with what ASA has done. Okay? So that's a challenge for you guys moving forward, to actually stay the course based on science, regardless of what your market share is. I wanted to round up, and I know we're pretty close to time. I think this is a very eloquent quote, and quite frankly, we can start it and end it with this. From Ralph Waldo Emerson, which obviously has ties to beef cattle, in particular the Red Angus breed. The native cattle are extinct, but the island is full of artificial breeds. The agriculturalists, Bakewell, created sheep and cows and horses to order, and breeds in which everything is omitted but what is economical. The cow is sacrificed to her bag, the ox to his serval. Much better than I could ever say it. Particularly so. But the point of this is that we need to think about cattle not in the context of breeds, but in the context of a genetic package that is economical for our clientele. Because breed delineation will change over time. And the way we think about breeds is going to change over time.
It's an artificial construct of our own imagination.
That was the hardest question I was asked on my written prelims at the University of Georgia. Keith Ignacy installed Rondon Rakaya, which asked a lot of technical-based questions. Keith Bertrand asked me one, and he asked me to find what a breed is. What's the answer to that? It's whatever the heck I want. The notion of a breed is man-made.
There one more?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my favorite one, sorry. Not this one, sorry. So, you're from educating your clientele that maybe straight breeding, tradition. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it's not incredibly stupid.
I noticed, Matt, you didn't wear your fast shoes today.
Actually, I don't know where Willie is. Willie, I got that from an employee of yours, which I don't know if they were meaning this for you or not, but I love this one.
I love the citation is Despair Incorporated.
So with that, sincerely appreciate your time. We went on a bit of a wandering journey, but hope it was at least helpful, and I believe Jackie's going to post these online, so you guys feel free to use this in any way you can. Willie?
You got time for questions?
Sure. Yeah, we can take a few quick questions, and then we'll also have a panel discussion this afternoon.
Let's see who all has questions, and then we'll...
We'll decide which ones we have time for.
Anybody over here?
Comment a little bit about the importance of what is used for Simmental program and the commercial program, the importance of those Simmental schools being unlikely to last through Simmental schools.
So Bob, the question is in a program that buys Sim-Angus genetics over and over again, the potential for actually increasing inbreeding due to relatedness of the Sim-Angus genetics that keep coming into the program.
Yeah, so the risk is that inbreeding increases homozygosity, right? At individual loci, same copy. That means by definition those alleles are from what? The same breed, right? So it decreases the effectiveness of heterosis because you've decreased heterozygosity. So it is important to start thinking about as you build F1s, make some variety in the product that you're producing for your commercial customers. Okay? They shouldn't source the same lines of Angus genetics going into that side of the equation, or the same Simmental genetics coming into that side of the equation, for a couple of reasons. One, inbreeding. But what's another sort of correlated effect of inbreeding? Risk of genetic defect, right? So we increase our occurrence or our observance of production of affected calves. So managing, there was a question last night actually in our panel discussion about really in essence managing genetic diversity. And I think that's something, as we think about our genomics tools, Matt pointed out the situation where we've got the Angus bull and the Charolais cow. Which of those specific ones do we make based on? That's actually a genetic diversity question, right? And so using our tools to help make sure that we sort of minimize inbreeding over time or maximize genetic diversity in the population. That's an important component.
I think that was Butcher's question last night about flying that out across to better serve clientele, so they're not coming back on that absolute cheer force on year after year after year as an example. Yes, your question.
An observation and then a comment, and follow my chain here, is I can take some completely average Angus cattle for feed and cross them with some Simmental cattle that have their own issues. Maybe pasterns and feet that are just marginally big, and cross them and get the cattle that have got excellent feet. And my theory is the heritability of feet and legs, at least in the dairy dead, is what? 0.15? Huh? 0.15? Lowly heritable. So I get to the part where lowly heritable traits are greatly affected by crossbreeding. Wade's sitting up there saying, in a disgusted fashion, like, they last 1.6 years longer, Willie. It's an index. But the industry, especially in Angus cattle, are saying feet are a problem. Why don't we utilize crossbreeding to help us cattle breeders who fixate on EPDs rather than indexes and utilize those things that are the industry today? Feet and legs. Everybody's talking about feet and legs. If you haven't been in an Angus meeting, red or black, that are today, what's the number one issue they're talking about?
Outside breed politics, feet and legs.
You brought that up, I didn't.
Just an observation.
All right, I'm just saying, okay. But they're talking about feet, so why don't we get there to promote crossbreeding, if you're following my chain? Lowly heritable traits are affected greatly by crossbreeding, and help them get to crossbreeding, and eventually help them get to indexes, like they last 1.6 years longer. So you get in my chain. I know they didn't study that at Mark, but they did study it at Mark. They last 1.6 years longer for lots of reasons. Reproduction.
Dentition,
Yeah.
feed.
As Jim said, cows lick their calves better. Okay, but they get there. But help us get there by selling it like maybe feet and legs are affected. I mean, they are at my house. I can take an average footed Red Angus cow and cross it with an average footed Simmental bull, and none of us had bad Simmental bulls, but they are, and we can get really sound footed. And I think it's because it's lowly heritable trait that's affected by crossbreeding. Now your comment.
Now, the alternative, well, I think that's convenience traits, or we've traditionally called them convenience traits, or actually economically traits of specific threshold kind of classes. So temperament, feet and leg structure, udders, all those sort of things. And some of them are actually, and I think there's some data that says actually feet and leg structure has moderate levels of heritability. It's just how much genetic diversity is there in the population that you're looking at. It could be that your Simmental are homozygous for a set of genes related to foot structure that happen to be of one type that's not real favorable. The Angus population could be homozygous for another form, and when you cross them, guess what? You sort of recover from the badness of both, right? Is that additive or non-additive? That's additive genetic action, right? It just happens the gene frequencies are skewed in both populations opposite ways. Okay? So there's some real challenges to sort that out. But I won't disagree, Willie, with your point that we sort of cure a lot of bills on a lot of fronts related to convenience traits when we crossbreed. Matt, you want a piece of that?
Just quickly and pragmatically, I suppose that.
That's me.
I suppose, Billy, the question is right now that I'm not going to argue with you on that, but it's a bit anecdotal, I would say, in the sense that I'm unaware of the data that shows the heterotic advantage in structure. So it's observation. So to quantify that, if that's important, I think you have to put that in a laundry list of other things that you'd like to implement or improve relative to national cattle evaluation, and then say, is this where we put our effort, or is it someplace else? And pragmatically, I think that's the question.
Any other burning questions before the panel?
I just got one more for Matt. All that being said, Matt, what kinds and types and breeds of bulls are you marketing? Are you teaching your kids to market? How do you market in your university system?
So our university system, we do have some purebred Angus, and then the rest are composites, either Simmental Black Angus or red Simmental Red Angus. So we have what we call Husker Blacks and Husker Reds. So we focus, I suppose, some on those breeds, just they have knowledge of the inner workings of those breed organizations, but probably in terms of marketing, we talk more about marketing purebred bulls and marketing composite bulls, and the differences perhaps in those two objectives. And what we talk a lot about in terms of marketing is honestly the right questions to ask when somebody calls you about buying a bull. Because it's really easy to, particularly for young students, to get high on certain traits or certain bulls and push those towards everybody. But it's the questions that you ask. What are your cows like? What's your feed resources like? How do you market? And then you push, I said push, but you push bulls based on those kinds of things. So in terms of marketing, I don't know if that gets your question, but those are the kinds of things we get at.
Yeah, that answers the question. So there it brings up another question then. What about for those producers who are strictly terminal and you want to maximize heterosis, and with 80% of the cow herds being Angus, where are your purebreds Simmental bulls?
Yeah, so you're right. We don't have. And ideally, if our cow herd was big enough, I'd have a population of purebred Angus, of purebred Red Angus, of purebred Simmental, but we're a bit limited in that respect. Our composites range, admittedly, from a quarter British to to 3/4 British. So we have a range there. So in that scenario you just talked about, I push a higher percentage continental bull peppers. Yep. So here's an example of how I don't even remotely close to everything right. Sometimes we may turn out a cleanup bull and we wind up with these composite calves that are pretty low percentage something. And it's amazing the guys that want to try a composite bull and they buy it like that quarter blood, you know, because they're gonna try it out. Well, then on average you've got 1/8 of that in your calves, and what good did that do? I mean that's part of the thing we face.
One more comment. I like what you guys have said about the fact that it's good to produce the maternal line female and the maternal bulls and babies. I believe it's a really paradigm shift from commercial producers that we did last night. People said, oh, I don't like this to do this, but then someone's going to do that. But that's very positive. But another alternative that I found to work very well in the swine industry is you take two maternal breeds, in our case the swine industry, we take land racing orchards. So we do things herd within a herd, so we do it within the herd, and so we have two rotation, and then turn over your turn with the duroc on that land race orchard. So we're getting a larger percentage of hybrid figure with a little selection of maternal breeds at the same time. Maybe to compensate something lost by hybrid figures. So we could really do those same kind of things. I think we have to just change our paradigm a little bit.
And there's larger ranges that do that very thing. There is some economy of scale there in being able to have a range where you develop your own replacements and also have a terminal breeding program. For smaller cow-calf producers, I think it makes good sense, if at all possible, to source maybe an F1 female to come back in as a replacement, turn out terminal bulls. I think that simplifies a lot of things. But the argument against that is a lot of those guys think I can raise better and cheaper replacement heifers. When I would argue, if you have somebody that's their business, it's likely they can do it better and cheaper than you can. But that goes back to the fact that most guys